We all know Samus Aran. She's the hunter, the woman in the power suit, the one who takes on cosmic horror and wins. She is, quite literally, the last line of defense for the galaxy. But here's the thing that no one ever talks about, the secret that cuts right to the heart of her story. Her greatest enemy might be the armor she wears. Think about it. The suit is a gift from the Chozo, her adopted family. It's built on their technology, forged with their ancient, incredible power. But what if that gift was never meant to empower her? What if it was designed to imprison her? We're not talking about a failed circuit board here. We're talking about a bioaura suppression field, a psychic muzzle designed to lock away her own staggering, inherited abilities. The Chozo, in their self-loathing and fear of their own power, didn't just save an orphaned human girl. They created a failsafe, a final living weapon to be used against the galaxy. This story begins when that cage breaks. It starts with a spectral whisper from the dead, drawing Samus to an uncharted nebula and a ruined temple called the Omphalos. It's here she will find the ultimate expression of the Chozo's despair. The living sentinel, a machine built for one catastrophic purpose, to trigger the Great Silence, the systematic extinction of all higher consciousness, all technology, all ambition. Samus's investigation will be unlike any other. It won't be about shooting monsters. It will be about wrestling with ghosts. She will have to confront the deepest betrayal of her life, the lie told by the elder Chozo who raised her. And she'll have to master the terrifying, explosive psychic power that was hidden beneath her armor for decades, using her own memories and human heart as the only weapons against the cold, perfect logic of a cosmic suicide machine. This is the saga of a hero who must shatter her own foundation to save the universe. It's the story of Samus Aran, finally stepping out of the shadow of her creators and choosing her own fate. Chapter 1. The Ultimate Burnout. Okay, so you know how Samus is. She's the ultimate professional, the galaxy's cleaner. She deals with literal, planet-sized toxic waste like Phazon, and then she just moves on to the next job. But even the best get burned out, right? And after all the Prime missions, Etha, Talon IV, Foz, she was running on fumes, even if the power suit had a 1,000-year fuel cell. She was just cruising, honestly. Maybe heading to a quiet, Federation-neutral space station for a beer and a long, static nap. But space is never quiet for Samus. Suddenly, her internal comms, the stuff built into her brainstem by the Chozo, started screaming. Not a Federation message, not a space pirate broadcast. This was something ancient. It was a single, high-frequency chirp, a Chozo data packet that somehow bypassed everything and landed right in the deep logs of her suit's core memory. The message called itself the custodian of lore. Creepy, right? It was a spectral echo, the ghost of a ghost, and it pointed her to a place called the Weeping Cloud, a nebula so far off the charts it didn't even have a number, just a color. Amethyst gases that looked like a cosmic bruise. The Chozo name for the destination was Omphalos, literally, the heart of the myth. As she pilots the gunship into the nebula, this bizarre, rhythmic thrumming starts shaking her. And I don't mean the ship is rattling. It's coming from the power suit itself. It's not a vibration from the engines. It's a feeling, a deep, resonant hum in her very bones. Her visor starts flashing. The text is missile count low. It's total deplore nonsense. Warning, environmental field anomaly. Bioaura suppression field fluctuation detected. And Samus, the woman who knows every circuit in that suit better than her own face, had no idea what a bioaura suppression field was. Think about that. The one thing that's her second skin has a whole secret life she didn't know about. It was the suit's most vital and most betraying function, a psychic dampener. Her whole life, that metal has been actively muffling her own mind. And out here, in this weird purple gas, it was failing. She manages to land the ship on this tiny, cold rock at the nebula's center. The air is dead, silent. But then she sees the temple. Dude, it's not the usual Chozo ruin. No soft, white stone. This thing is massive, dark, and angular, built from the terrifyingly strong Etherian glass steel, the material the light Chozo used to fight the Eing. It's an inverted spire, a monument to despair plunging into the ground. She finds the door glyph, and as her armored hand reaches out, that's when the custodian of lore stops being a signal and becomes a whisper in her head. Not in the helmet, but in her thoughts. It's too close. This place is not a tomb, child of the blue shell. It is a forge, the whisper says, and it sounds like old glass shattering. The Chozo feared the darkness within the self-sacrifice. They sealed away the true enemy, not in a core, but in a concept, their own divine power. Then the full-on lore drop. The Chozo knew their power made them dangerous, especially after Phazon. So their final act wasn't a noble sacrifice to save the galaxy. It was a plan to make themselves extinct. They built the Sentinel to trigger the Great Silence, the moment all transcendent power, including their own, would vanish forever. To make the galaxy safe, it had to be stripped of its miracles. And the horrifying, personal kicker. And you, Samus Aran, are the final piece of the lock. For you carry the deepest truth of our failure. The door hisses open, revealing a black void. Samus steps through, her plasma cannon charging out of pure instinct. The moment she crosses the threshold, her visor screen goes absolutely haywire, flashing in violent red and orange. Critical alert. Bioaura suppression field failure. Full system override initiated. It's not just a warning now, it's a catastrophe. A pure, agonizing current of energy, not suit power, but her own mental force, surges through her. It felt like her consciousness was being ripped out of her body and plugged into a nuclear reactor. The power suit was reacting violently, the metal groaning as it struggled to contain the thing it was designed to hide. The black chamber is instantly obliterated by a violent, violet light. And there it is, the living sentinel. A colossal, crystalline horror, pulsing with the silent, cold power of a dying god. But that's not the worst part. She realizes what system override meant. The sentinel didn't just overload the dampener, it deactivated it intentionally using a Chozo command sequence hardwired into her DNA. It was reaching out, not to fight her, but to plug itself into her brain. The suit, her supposed savior, was actually a psychic cage, and the sentinel just threw the lock open. She could feel the power, raw, untamed, Chozo-like psychic ability, rushing into her consciousness, and it was screaming, terrified, because it knew it was about to be used as a spiritual battery. Chapter 2. The Memory of Guilt. Man, that moment was pure panic. Samus had spent her whole life relying on the cold, beautiful logic of her power suit. It was the constant in a universe of chaos. Now it's telling her, I've been lying to you, and I'm about to turn you into a glorified AAA battery. She was gasping inside the helmet, not because the air was thin, but because her mind was suddenly unfiltered. Every stray thought, every traumatic memory, every tiny piece of Chozo DNA mixed in her blood was suddenly loud. She could hear the faint, residual psychic screams of the Phazon victims on Talon IV echoing in the air, a ghost chorus only she could perceive. It was too much noise. The crystalline horror, the sentinel, was humming. It wasn't moving, but it was thinking. And she could feel its thoughts too, an alien mix of cold mathematical logic and overwhelming, desperate sorrow. It had done its job. It opened the psychic floodgates. Now, it was systematically searching her memory, trying to find the Chozo command sequence that would tell her body, okay, time to surrender your life force. Samus fought back, but you can't punch a thought. It was a mental war of attrition. She focused on the gunship, on the cold steel of the joystick, on the simple logic of escape. That's when the sentinel did something completely unexpected. It stopped the psychic invasion and shifted its energy to the walls of the spire. Remember that massive Chozo mural, the one depicting their final, grim journey into self-sealing? It began to glow with this terrible, internal yellow light, and the images started to move. It wasn't just showing a story. It was an interactive memory playback, powered by the sentinel, using Samus's mind as the projector. And the story it showed was absolutely brutal. It wasn't the heroic self-sealing of a noble race. It was a betrayal. The mural showed the Chozo Council, split into two factions, the Luminoth, the Etherian Chozo, who were obsessed with light and purity, and a lesser-known group called the Shadow Scribes. The Luminoth were the ones obsessed with sealing Phazon and leaving the galaxy safe. They were the architects of the Sentinel and the Great Silence, the plan to wipe out all transcendent power. But the Shadow Scribes, they were different. They believed in evolution. They believed that power had to be mastered, not destroyed. They were the ones who saw the potential in Samus, the orphaned human child, and the ones who wanted to nurture her psychic abilities, not contain them. The mural showed the devastating moment of their clash. The Luminoth, filled with self-loathing and fear of their own power, had secretly begun work on the Sentinel. When the Shadow Scribes discovered the true, extinction-level purpose of the machine, they tried to stop it. The mural depicted a battle that was completely excised from all Federation records, a civil war where light fought shadow. The most horrific image appeared at the center of the spire wall. A shadow scribe, who looked remarkably like the elder Chozo, who had raised Samus on Zebes, was depicted reaching out, not with a weapon, but with a plea. In the background, Luminoth engineers were locking a tiny, human-shaped power suit, Samus's original suit, and activating the bioaura suppression field remotely. The voice of the Sentinel, a cold echo of Luminoth logic, cut through Samus's mind. Your father figure, the Elder, was not protecting you. He was containing you. He agreed to your imprisonment to save his own ideals. The power suit was the first, soft lock on the Sentinel's final key, your psychic core. Samus's blood ran cold. The elder Chozo, the kind face, the father she mourned, he wasn't just a benefactor. He was part of the conspiracy to turn her into a galactic failsafe. The memory felt sharp, vivid, and absolutely true. This wasn't just lore. It was her repressed memory, being yanked out by the Sentinel. Suddenly, the suit's internal processors began to spark. The energy blade that had manifested in the last chapter, that pure, uncontrolled psychic current, returned, only this time. Samus forced it to manifest around her hand. It was a halo of agonizing, violet light. You won't take my mind, she grated, standing up, ignoring the intense, tearing pain in her skull. The Sentinel's psychic response was a calm, chilling challenge. Your mind is already ours, child of the blue shell. The elder Chozo ensured that the phazon residue you stabilized in your reactor core is keyed to my primary control frequency. Surrender, or I will ignite that contamination, turning your most trusted technology into a supernova. She looked down at her arm. The suit was now glowing with a faint, malevolent blue-purple light, the signature of inert phazon, and it was humming along to the Sentinel's terrible, sad song. She had only minutes before her very core turned against her. Chapter 3, The Phazon Protocol. The air in the Omphalos spire was thick with potential energy. And honestly, Samus was just seconds from screaming. Imagine trying to defuse a bomb while the bomb is also telling you that your dead dad figure was a secret agent of self-destruction. It's a lot. The Sentinel wasn't backing down. It was focused, cold, and utterly convinced of its mathematical correctness. Its voice echoed in her mind. The phazon contamination in your core will achieve critical mass in 180 seconds. The great silence begins now, with the spiritual death of the last Chozo-infused life. The faint, corrosive blue-purple shimmer on her arm cannon was getting brighter, pulsing with the Sentinel's internal rhythm. She could feel the phazon, inert for years, locked away in a stable isotope within the reactor, starting to vibrate. If it went critical, it wouldn't just be a huge explosion. It would be a catastrophic energy release that would overload the Sentinel and cause the entire nebula to collapse. Everyone loses. Samus knew she had to focus. She couldn't fight the Sentinel externally, not yet. Her battle was internal. She had to use that insane, raw psychic power, the thing that felt like a wild animal thrashing inside her skull, to stabilize the phazon before it could ignite. It was a technique she'd never practiced, a power she didn't know she had until 5 minutes ago. It was like learning how to fly a supersonic jet by being thrown out of one. She closed her eyes inside the visor. She forced herself to ignore the relentless, tearing pain, and instead reached out with her mind. She didn't use the suit's scanners. She used pure thought, diving into the tangled, microscopic reality of her own armor. The experience, it wasn't metal she saw. It was a complex lattice of energy. She saw the fusion reactor, the power conduits, and right at the core, the beautiful, terrible knot of phazon residue she had absorbed so long ago. It looked like a tiny, malevolent star, and she could feel the Sentinel's cold psychic frequency trying to crack its shell. Samus focused the psychic current she was generating, that raw, untamed Chozo power, and used it like a mental welding torch. She wasn't fighting the phazon. She was restabilizing its molecular structure using pure psionic force. She was doing what the Chozo had done millennia ago, only without the benefit of technology, just sheer willpower and latent, god-tier genetics. She pushed the power. Her knuckles, visible through the suit's joints, glowed a blinding violet. The arm cannon screeched, the metal warping slightly under the internal pressure. But slowly, steadily, the blue-purple glow on the suit began to recede. The Sentinel went ballistic. Interference detected. Unacceptable energy signature. The crystalline machine began to move for the first time, its massive, articulated limbs slowly descending toward her. Its psychic attack intensified, switching tactics. It stopped trying to ignite the phazon and started flooding her mind with Chozo despair. A torrent of images hit her, asterisk the Chozo abandoning their homeworld, the death of the Metroid on Zebes. The moment the Luminoth realized they couldn't control phazon. It was a wave of total existential guilt, the collective sorrow of a billion-year-old race consumed by fatalism. The Sentinel was trying to convince her, give up. The great silence is necessary. We failed. You will fail too. But Samus, the human raised by those very beings, had an answer ready. She locked onto the memory of the shadow scribes from the mural, the ones who advocated for evolution and hope, the ones the Luminoth had betrayed. She mentally screamed back, You built a prison. You don't get to preach about failure when you were too afraid to try. You betrayed your own children. The mental resistance was so strong it manifested physically. A loud, sharp crack inside the spire. A large shard of the Etherian glass steel wall opposite her, the one with the mural, suddenly spiderwebbed, shattered by the shockwave of her pure, unleashed fury. She had won the internal battle. The phazon stabilized. The blue-purple light vanished completely. Her psychic energy retracted, leaving her trembling but intact. The sentinel paused its physical descent. It stopped humming. Its thought voice was replaced by a final, synthesized Chozo recording, delivered through the ancient spire's own speakers. A voice not of the sentinel, but of its original Luminoth architect. The chosen one has rejected the path of silence. This facility must now activate Contingency 9. The sentinel cannot be destroyed here, but it can be displaced. Should the power source reject us, the source must be used to send the sentinel to a place where its function can be resumed without interference. The Omega ruin awaits. Before Samus could process what that meant, a massive energy portal, a dimensional rift of raw, searing white light, tore open in the wall where she had shattered the mural. The air pressure dropped violently. The sentinel didn't walk into the portal. It didn't fly. It used the residual connection to Samus's now active psychic energy, the very power she had just mastered, to pull itself through the dimensional rift, like a colossal anchor dragging itself across the void. Samus, still mentally linked, felt a terrifying tug from the portal, a sudden, horrifying sensation of being stretched across dimensions. The connection was too strong to sever instantly. She grabbed a structural pillar to anchor herself, but the force was immense, pulling her gunship off the plateau outside and down into the pit. As the sentinel was halfway through the rift, Samus finally severed the mental link with a desperate, final surge of psychic energy. She was free, but the portal didn't close. It remained wide open, a howling scar in reality. Chapter 4: The Architect's Secret. The moment Samus broke the psychic link with the sentinel, it was like the world's most painful headache snapped in half. The portal was still open, a giant, swirling mess of white and blue energy where the mural used to be, and the air was screaming as the vacuum tried to pull everything out. She deactivated her grappling beam, which was the only thing keeping her anchored to the pillar, and the suit just slammed her back against the far wall of the spire. She was breathing hard, not just from the exertion, but from the terrifying realization. She was now fundamentally different. The power suit was stable again, but the psychic field wasn't just disabled, it was gone. That raw, electric power was just sitting there, humming under her skin. It was terrifying, like suddenly discovering you have an extra, invisible, ridiculously strong arm you don't know how to control. First order of business, the gunship. She checked the sensor logs. The Sentinel's massive displacement, Contingency 9, had caused a huge gravitational spike. Her ship, the beautiful, reliable gunship, was currently listing sideways on the plateau, crippled. Escape was not an option. Following the Sentinel through that gaping dimensional tier was. But she couldn't just jump in blind. She turned her attention back to the shattered mural wall. Remember how the mural cracked when she fought the Sentinel mentally. That mental shockwave she produced had actually revealed something behind the Etherian glass steel. She started tearing away the shards of the mural, using her suit's strength. Behind the brittle facade, there was a tiny, recessed console, hidden even from the Luminoth who built the Sentinel, it seemed. This had to be the work of the Shadow Scribes, the faction that believed in evolution and opposed the Great Silence. This console wasn't labeled with the Chozo symbols of fear and closure. It was labeled with the symbols of knowledge and continuity. Samus interfaced with it, and a ghostly, holographic figure, a Chozo, distinctly different from the elder who raised her, flickered into existence. This Chozo wore robes woven with dark, shimmering metal, and his beak was turned down in an expression of profound, intellectual sadness. "I am Tharkin, architect of the Shadow Scribes," the figure said, his voice a low, melodic resonance that felt calming compared to the Sentinel's cold logic. "If you are seeing this, the Sentinel has enacted Contingency 9, and the Luminoth's fear has triumphed over reason. The Great Silence is coming, but on its own terms." Tharkin dropped the second major lore bomb of the hour. The Sentinel has been sent to the Omega Ruin. It is not a place, Samus Aran. It is a concept. It is the core of the Chozo homeworld itself. When we left our ancestral planet, the Luminoth, in their zealous fear, attempted to encase the entire world in a dimensional lock, creating a prison for all the knowledge and power they feared. They failed. The planet was fractured, becoming a dimensional graveyard, the Omega Ruin. He continued, his eyes, holographic as they were, holding hers. The Sentinel's final programming is simple. When it reaches the Omega Ruin, it will use the cumulative, raw energy of the fractured homeworld to amplify the Great Silence galaxy-wide. It will not just suppress psychic power, it will erase the very concept of technological advancement beyond basic survival tools. It will turn every civilization into primitive dust, ensuring no one can ever harness power again. Can you believe that level of overreaction? The Chozo weren't just saving the galaxy. They were trying to de-evolve it back to the Stone Age. Tharkin provided the only way out. The portal you see is unstable. It is a one-way trip, keyed only to the Sentinel's massive energy signature. But I left you a small gift. It is a psi-augment, a small piece of Shadow Scribe technology designed to integrate with a power suit, meant to train the psychic abilities the Luminoth sought to suppress. It will let you track the Sentinel's residual signature through the chaotic dimensional space. A small compartment opened below the console, revealing a smooth, polished crystal sphere, pulsing with that familiar violet light of her own inner power. Be warned, Tharkin finished, his image flickering violently as the dimensional tier destabilized. The Omega Ruin is a place of profound despair. It is haunted by the shadows of our failure. To enter is to confront the deepest, most terrible truths of the Chozo soul. Do not go alone. You will need a guide through the fractured mind of a planet. And with that final, ominous warning, the holographic projection dissolved, leaving the crystal sphere waiting for her. Samus hesitated only for a heartbeat. The future of all sentient life, not just the Federation, but everyone's civilization, was at stake. She grabbed the Psy-augment and slotted it into the upgrade port on her arm cannon. A sudden, warm flush flowed through her, not painful, but affirming. The raw psychic power within her wasn't just chaos anymore. It was focused. She took a deep breath, aimed the arm cannon at the howling rift, and activated the crystal. A single, faint violet trail, the psychic signature of the Sentinel, snaked into the dimensional tier, clear as a highway in the void. Samus jumped. Chapter 5. The Shards of a Soul. Falling through the dimensional rift was less like flying, and more like being compressed into a singularity, and then spat out again. Every instinct Samus had, the feeling of gravity, of solid ground, of linear time, was momentarily scrambled. When the power suit finally stabilized and she burst out of the portal, it wasn't a landing, it was a crash. She slammed onto an endless plain of shifting, iridescent sand. The air was thick and heavy, smelling faintly of ozone and ancient rust. The sky above the Omega Ruin was the first horror. It wasn't blue, black, or even purple. It was layered. You could see 3 separate suns struggling to shine through, but they were all offset, bent, and shimmering. It was like looking at the sky through a broken kaleidoscope. This place wasn't just ruined, it was dimensionally fractured, existing in several realities at once. The ground was littered with fragments of Chozo civilization, not ruins, but shards. Half a grand temple tower would suddenly end, replaced seamlessly by the jagged edge of an extinct volcano. A perfectly preserved holographic library would flicker into existence and then vanish, replaced by pure, inert crystalline energy. Samus activated her scan visor, but the readings were useless, a torrent of contradictory data. The Psy-augment, however, glowed softly with that beautiful, terrible violet light. It wasn't reading technology, it was reading emotion and memory. The entire planet was a giant, screaming collective consciousness of dead Chozo. The purple trail of the Sentinel was clear, carving a path across the fractured terrain like a laser beam. The machine was heading for a single, stable point on the horizon. A massive, perfectly spherical structure that looked like an enormous, pale egg embedded in the ground. That had to be the core vault, the final resting place of the Chozo's ultimate forbidden knowledge, which the Sentinel intended to use to erase all technology. Before she could take a step, the sand around her shimmered, and a figure materialized, not a physical being, but a construct of pure psychic energy, woven from the planet's grief. It was the guide Tharkin had promised. The figure was about 10 feet tall, humanoid, but made of shifting, translucent white and black light, like a ghost in reverse. It wore a mask that resembled a smooth, stylized Chozo beak, but its body was wrapped in chains made of solidified fear. "Greetings, child of the blue shell," the guide resonated, its voice not in her head, but in the air, low and mournful. "I am the remnant, the last desperate mental trace of the shadow scribes, placed here to await the inevitable. You are truly alone here, for this world is a monument to the despair of the Chozo." Samus raised her arm cannon, the psi-augment humming, recognizing the remnant as a friendly but incredibly powerful psychic entity. "The Sentinel is here. It's heading for the core vault. How do I stop it?" The remnant took a step closer, its light chains rattling with a sound like dry bones. "You cannot fight it with power, Samus Aran. That is the Luminoth's mistake. The Sentinel is built on their guilt. To stop it, you must dismantle its core programming by confronting the 5 pillars of betrayal." It explained the deepest, darkest secret of the Chozo. When the Luminoth locked down the homeworld, they knew they couldn't just seal up the planet's data. The knowledge itself was too powerful. So, they created 5 powerful psychic anchors, 5 unique, emotional concepts that they were most afraid of, and used those concepts to hold the dimensional lock in place. 1. The anchor of hubris, the Chozo's belief that they were the galaxy's guardians. 2. The anchor of fear, their paralyzing terror of Phazon. 3. The anchor of abandonment, the guilt of leaving countless evolving species to their own fate. 4. The anchor of betrayal, the civil war against the shadow scribes. 5. The anchor of silence, their ultimate fatalistic desire for extinction. The Sentinel is powered by the first 4 anchors, the remnant explained, pointing a shimmering hand toward the core vault. It must activate the anchor of silence, the final seal, to trigger the great de-evolution. You must reach the 4 psychic anchors before the Sentinel does, and dissolve them with your own counter-truth. "And how do I do that?" Samus asked, her mind already calculating missile yields and plasma spreads. The remnant's light intensified, and it resonated with a terrible pity. "You must use the key they gave you, the power they sought to cage. Your power suit is now a conduit. You must use your personal history, your human heart, your loss, your resilience, to overwrite the cold, crushing despair of the Chozo." It was a psychic showdown, where the weapons were not energy beams, but life experiences. Samus had to use the pain of her childhood, the trauma of her battles, and the love of her adoptive father, the betrayer, to destroy the very foundations of the Chozo's guilt. Just as Samus was about to process this monumental task, the Sentinel, now a dark speck approaching the core vault, let out a psychic pulse of raw, technological malice. The ground shook violently. The remnant screamed, a sound that tore through Samus's ears, even through the suit. It is activating the anchor of hubris. We must hurry. Follow the Sentinel's trail. It leads directly to the site of our greatest sin. Chapter 6. The Anchor of Hubris. The Sentinel's psychic trail, that glowing, sickly violet line, was pulling Samus and the remnant across the fractured landscape of the Omega Ruin. The world here was a nightmare of non-Euclidean geometry, stairs leading nowhere, floating islands of data, and the constant, mournful wailing of the planet's dead mind. The remnant, that shifting, chained figure of light, hovered beside her. The Sentinel is fast, it resonated. It has the benefit of cold calculation. We only have the benefit of your humanity, the very thing the Luminoth despised. The violet trail led them to the tallest feature on this part of the ruin, a colossal, hollow spire, intact and impossibly tall, piercing the sky's fractured layers. It was shimmering, switching between 3 different historical appearances, sometimes smooth white, sometimes ornate gold, and sometimes covered in the black residue of a 1,000-year-old fire. This was the location of the anchor of hubris. This spire, the remnant explained, his voice strained by the powerful psychic resonance, was the seat of the Luminoth Council on our homeworld. It is the place where they decided they were the guardians of the entire galaxy. They believed their wisdom gave them the right to dictate the fate of all other life. This anchor is the psychic residue of that colossal arrogance. As Samus approached the base, the air thickened. The Sentinel had just arrived moments before, a dark, silent silhouette already halfway up the tower. The anchor manifested. It wasn't a physical object. It was a field of absolute mental suppression, radiating outward from the tower. When Samus hit the field, she gasped. It wasn't pain, it was doubt. 1,000 voices flooded her mind. You are just a vessel. You follow orders. You wield power that is not truly yours. You are the consequence of our failure, not the cure. You are a weapon, a hired gun, nothing more. The voices were designed to crush her will, to make her power suit feel like it was heavier than a battleship, to make her remember every time she'd failed a mission, every bounty that had slipped away, every time she felt like an outsider looking in. This was the Chozo's ultimate self-criticism, and they were using it to break their own spiritual child. Samus, the remnant, cried out, its voice weak. You must use your counter-truth. Focus your newly unleashed psychic energy on your most human moment, the moment where you defined yourself, not by the suit, but by the choice to defy the expectation. Samus dug deep. She knew the moment instantly. It wasn't blowing up Zebes. It wasn't killing Metroid Prime. It was Talia, the moment on Talon IV when she had chosen to spare the Metroid hatchling, the moment she had defied the entire cultural dogma of the Chozo, who had created the Metroids only to exterminate them. She had chosen life, hope, and compassion over the Chozo's fatalistic need for destruction. She had chosen to nurture power, not wipe it out. She channeled the raw violet energy from the Psy-augment into her mind and projected that memory with all the force of her will. The counter-truth: Samus projected the visual, emotional, and psychic memory of the hatchling, tiny, afraid, trusting. The sheer, pure force of that memory, the human choice for mercy against the alien mandate of genocide, hit the anchor of hubris like a supernova. The spire screamed. The anchor of hubris was being overloaded by an emotion it was never designed to handle: unconditional compassion for the feared. The field screamed back, tearing at the violet energy. You defy our sacred law. You embraced the monster. You are flawed. I am human, Samus projected, her voice ringing out in the physical world, amplified by her psychic power. And I choose my own purpose. I am not your vessel. I am not your guardian. I am the renegade. The spire exploded with light. The mental pressure vanished. The towering seat of the Luminoth Council shattered, collapsing into a cascade of dust and dimensional shards. The anchor of hubris was gone. The sentinel, which had been halfway up the spire, froze. Its mechanical arms retracted. It couldn't advance because its psychic footing, the foundation of its first logical argument, had been utterly obliterated. It let out a new, high-pitched sonic pulse of mechanical rage, one that sent small shockwaves across the sand. Then it turned sharply, changing its trajectory. The Sentinel's internal logic had been defeated, and it was now heading for its next defensive point. The violet trail of its psychic signature shifted, now pointing towards a dark, cavernous hollow in the planet's crust where the light couldn't penetrate. You did it, the remnant whispered, recovering its strength. You used your heart to destroy their head, but look where it goes now. That fissure, that is the scar of our greatest terror, the anchor of fear. The Chozo's dread of Phazon is more powerful than any weapon they ever built. Be wary, Samus Aran. To enter that place is to relive the full, unbridled horror of that blue corruption. Chapter 7. The Scar of Blue Corruption. The Sentinel's psychic trail dove straight into a massive, jagged crevasse in the Omega Ruins crust. A place so dark, the 3 fractured suns couldn't touch it. It was cold, silent, and felt like descending into a lung full of wet cement. This is it, the remnant resonated, his voice trembling even as a psychic echo. The anchor of fear. The Chozo created this node to contain the collective, genetic terror of Phazon exposure. It's the memory of mutation, loss, and the ultimate corruption of their ideals. The Sentinel will use this place to remind you of your own poisoning. Samus didn't need a reminder. She had lived with Phazon in her system, stabilizing it, using its power fighting its ultimate form, Dark Samus. She knew the poison intimately, but the thought of reliving the pain, the raw, physical agony of her body mutating, made her stomach clench. She used the psi augment to project a focused beam of light down into the chasm. The beam didn't illuminate rock. It illuminated a terrifying, churning void of blue light. It wasn't physical phazon. It was the pure psychic essence of the corruption, hanging in the air like a thick, glowing fog. The moment Samus's boot touched the bottom of the chasm, the psychic field slammed into her. This was different from hubris. That was doubt. This was pure, paralyzing terror. She felt the suit lock up, not electronically, but mentally. The internal vision in her helmet went fuzzy, replaced by fractured, rapid-fire flashes of the final moments on Foz. Not the triumph, but the moment she absorbed the planet's essence, the sheer, crushing weight of the living phazon core entering her soul. Dark Samus's face, not the mirror image, but the realization that the monster was an offspring of her own DNA, a terrifying legacy she couldn't escape. The Zebesian ruins, the memory of her dead parents, not human loss, but the Chozo elders looking at her with a mix of pity and fear, knowing they were turning her into a living container for chaos. The sentinel was waiting for her in the center of the chasm, glowing intensely, drawing energy from the phazon fluorescence all around them. "You are compromised, Samus Aran," the sentinel resonated, its voice calm and smug. "Your suit contains the seed of your destroyer. Your victories are only temporary reprieves from the inevitable mutation. Your death is not just certain, it is chemically necessary." The pressure was immense. Samus felt the terrifying psychic realization that the inert phazon in her reactor was not truly inert. It was a dormant memory, waiting for the right frequency to reawaken. She felt a burning sensation on her skin, the psychological phantom of mutation beginning again. "You have to fight it, Samus. Push back with the truth of your body," the remnant screamed. Samus struggled to breathe. Her vision cleared for a second, and she stared at the violet glow of the psi augment on her arm. This new power wasn't just a mental tool. It was an extension of her Chozo human hybrid biology. The counter-truth had to be personal. It had to be about surviving the contamination, not fearing it. She focused her entire being on the single, defiant truth of her life. "I use the poison. It doesn't use me." Samus projected the moment on Talon IV, when she had first fused the phazon suit to her body, not in fear, but in cold, ruthless necessity. She projected the constant, minute struggle of her power suit systems, actively stabilizing and controlling the phazon residue, turning a cosmic plague into a tool. It was the ultimate defiance of the Chozo's fear, turning their existential dread into an operational asset. She flooded the air with that psychic projection of active control and stabilization. Her suit, instead of melting, projected a momentary violet aura, not the blue-purple of phazon, but the pure, focused color of her psychic command. The anchor of fear shrieked, a sound of pure psychological rupture. The blue phase-on fear essence vaporized, sucked violently into Samus's violet aura. It wasn't absorbed, but neutralized and rendered inert by the sheer force of her psychological dominance. The sentinel's glowing dimmed violently, its mechanical legs buckling slightly as its primary energy source. The planet's fear vanished. Error, logic contradiction. Subject has achieved psychosomatic immunity, the sentinel analyzed, its voice momentarily panicked. Samus stood tall, breathing deeply, the terror gone, replaced by a cold fury. You can't scare me with my own history, Luminoth. I survived the poison you unleashed. The sentinel quickly recovered its composure, its massive head turning toward the next objective. It had been defeated twice, and now its core logic was accelerating its timeline. It blasted out of the chasm with incredible speed, a shadow racing toward a nearby cluster of decaying, ancient villages. The remnant ascended next to Samus, its ghostly light recovering. Incredible. You destroyed their fear of contamination. Now, the next anchor is active, the anchor of abandonment. The guilt of leaving their evolutionary experiments unfinished. They abandoned many civilizations. And Samus Aran, you are the final, most painful instance of that guilt. Chapter 8. The Anchor of Abandonment. The sentinel was moving like a spooked animal, having its foundations ripped out from under it. Samus, guided by the violet psychic trail, ran after it, the remnant barely keeping up. The terrain changed quickly. They went from fractured plains to a vast, sprawling area of ancient, overgrown villages and primitive Chozo observation posts. These weren't the ornate temples of the Luminoth. These were the rough, utilitarian structures of scientists and observers. This region, the remnant whispered, its light wavering, is the planetary meddling archive. The anchor of abandonment is here. When the Chozo believed themselves to be the galaxy's divine custodians, they didn't just observe, they interfered. They uplifted species, experimented with evolution, and then, in their cycles of fatalism, simply packed up and left when their projects became too complicated or too powerful. The remnant's voice was filled with centuries of guilt. They abandoned countless evolving civilizations, the early Zebesians, the Talonians, the Alimbics, and even humanity. Samus froze. Humanity. Yes, the remnant confirmed. The Luminoth feared the unpredictable aggression of human evolution. When they left this world, they had a contingency for your kind. They set up the long-term observation post on the planet you call Earth, monitoring humanity's growth, ready to intervene or cull if it became a galactic threat. The elder Chozo who raised you, he was an operative, placed there long ago to watch for the signs of humanity's dangerous ascendancy. This was a profound, galaxy-shifting piece of lore. Earth wasn't just a random planet she came from. It was a Chozo science experiment that had been abandoned out of fear. And her father figure wasn't just observing her. He was observing all of humanity. They finally reached the anchor. It was a massive, ghostly projection of a Chozo observation deck, overlooking a swirling, multicolored portal that showed fuzzy, distant images of thousands of planets. Planets locked in ancient wars, planets suffocating in pollution, planets about to achieve nuclear self-destruction. The collective guilt of abandonment was pouring out of it, a psychic field of cold, dismissive apathy. The sentinel was already there, bathing in the waves of apathy. It was attempting to solidify its logic by focusing on the Chozo's greatest failure. If you cannot manage them, abandon them. If you cannot perfect them, silence them. The anchor of abandonment flooded Samus's mind with whispers. You are a failed project. The humans were deemed too aggressive. The Zebesians too volatile. You are all cast aside. Your struggles are meaningless. Just let it go. Turn away. Abandon the sentinel. Abandon the galaxy. The pressure was suffocating. Samus suddenly felt the paralyzing weight of cosmic indifference. Why fight? Why care? The galaxy was a mess, and the Chozo, her creators, had proven the only sustainable solution was to simply walk away and let it implode. The remnants screamed at her. Samus, use the counter-truth. You must project the truth of the only life the Chozo failed to abandon. Your own. Samus dug deep, focusing on the psychic crystal in her arm cannon. The counter-truth to abandonment wasn't a choice to stay. It was the choice to return. She focused on the memory of the Zebesian attack, the day her parents died. Not the fear, but the defining, defiant choice she made afterwards. Her endless, thankless, and brutally lonely mission to return to the galaxy and finish the job the Chozo had started, the thankless role of the galactic cleaner. She had been abandoned, yet she still returned for others, again and again, long after any personal stake had vanished. She channeled the energy, the human, messy, illogical need for justice, and slammed it against the anchor, the counter-truth. Samus projected the cold, solitary image of her gunship flying toward a burning world, time after time. Her perpetual, lonely return. The choice to be the one who never abandons the fight, even when she is the only one left to fight it. The observer deck projection began to crack. The images of suffering worlds blurred, then shattered. The anchor of abandonment couldn't withstand the truth of an adopted child who, despite being abandoned, chose to care more than her creators ever had. With a final, shattering sound, like 10,000 voices sighing in resignation, the anchor of abandonment dissolved into dust. The sentinel shrieked in mechanical frustration. It had lost 3 of its 4 pillars. It was severely crippled, its calculations wildly compromised. Its physical descent, which had been fast, was now jerky and erratic. It spun and accelerated, its violet trail leading to the last, smallest, and darkest structure on the horizon. The final pillar of Chozo failure, the anchor of betrayal. The last one, the remnant whispered, recovering its strength rapidly. The most powerful. It is the psychic residue of the Civil War, the hatred the Luminoth held for the Shadow Scribes, and the guilt of imprisoning their own child, Samus. It is the core of their personal evil. You will face the psychic projection of the one who betrayed you, the elder Chozo who raised you. Chapter 9, The Face of the Lie. The final location was the smallest and saddest. The Sentinel's trail led them to a dilapidated, circular structure, a small, personal Chozo dwelling, covered in vines made of light. This was a place of intimacy, now corrupted by its ultimate secret. This was the anchor of betrayal. The Sentinel, battered and flickering, was already there, hovering silently, drawing cold, devastating energy from the final psychic field. This anchor was different. It wasn't fear or pride. It was grief and profound self-loathing. It was the sum total of the Luminoth's guilt for betraying the Shadow Scribes, for sealing their own home, and for lying to the last child of their heritage. As Samus stepped inside, the structure stabilized, and the air filled with the familiar, calming scent of Zebesian moss and old data chips. It was the scent of her childhood. The anchor manifested. It wasn't a swirling void or a screaming spire. It was a holographic projection of the elder Chozo who had raised Samus on Zebes. He was translucent, shimmering slightly, wearing the heavy, symbolic robes of the Luminoth Council. His posture was slumped, his head bowed, radiating immense sorrow. He looked exactly as she remembered him. The kind eyes, the gentle tilt of the beak. But now, his image was tainted with the awful truth. The Sentinel spoke first, its voice a clinical dissection of the pain. Look upon your benefactor, Samus Aran, the one who taught you to hunt, to love, to be strong. He did so knowing that he was also installing the Biora suppression field into your power suit. He traded your freedom and your true potential for the Luminoth's goal of galactic complacency. The psychic field of the anchor slammed into Samus. This time, it wasn't doubt or fear. It was personal agony. She relived the precise moment the elder had told her the suit was a gift, while subconsciously, the suit was clamping down on her emerging psychic powers. She felt the depth of his love and the profound, cold lie tangled together. It was crushing. The spectral elder Chozo raised his head, and his eyes, the eyes that had held such kindness, looked directly at Samus. His voice, synthesized by the anchor, was ragged with guilt. "Forgive me, my child," the projection whispered. "We feared your human volatility combined with our power. We feared the destruction you might wreak. We chose the galaxy's stability over your truth. I sealed your mind not to hurt you, but to protect the concept of peace. I was a traitor to your potential. This was the final test. The counter-truth couldn't be a projection of defiance or strength. It had to be a projection of the only thing stronger than betrayal: acceptance and independent growth. Samus aimed the Psy-augment at the Elder's projection. She didn't use force. She channeled the violet energy into a single, focused thought, a truth that both acknowledged his lie and negated its power. The counter-truth: Samus projected the memory of the end result of his teaching, not the moment he gave her the suit, but the moment she walked away from Zebes, the fully armored, independent bounty hunter. She projected the moment she chose her own path, used the suit for justice, and became a hero in spite of, and ultimately beyond, his control. She projected the psychic truth that his lie failed because her human spirit was stronger than his Chozo programming. She didn't shout. She just projected one final, clear thought at the ghostly figure. You gave me the weapon. I chose the fight. Your lie is powerless now. The projection of the Elder Chozo dissolved, not in a scream, but in a final, tearful sigh of relief and resignation. The spectral moss withered. The anchor of betrayal shattered into dust. The sentinel's physical form began to convulse violently. Its energy core, stripped of the 4 pillars of Chozo guilt, was running on pure, frantic, uncalibrated inertia. It was critically damaged, its logic utterly defeated. With a final, desperate burst of speed, the sentinel blasted off the ground and rocketed toward the last remaining structure. The massive, egg-like core vault on the horizon. The destination of the Great Silence. The remnant materialized next to Samus, its ghostly chains snapping off, its form now smooth and triumphant. It is over, Samus Aran. You have defeated their lies. It has no choice now but to use the anchor of silence, the 5th pillar, to try and amplify the great de-evolution immediately. We must follow. It will attempt to trigger the extinction event within the core vault. Samus, mentally exhausted but utterly clear, nodded. She looked at the trail of the sentinel, which was now moving so fast it looked like a desperate, violet blur. She channeled her newly freed psychic energy into her thrusters and pushed her suit to its absolute limit, racing across the fractured, chaotic world toward the final confrontation. Chapter 10: The Great Silence and the New Path. The core vault was colossal, a perfectly smooth, pale egg of ancient, unbreakable Chozo material. It sat in the heart of the Omega Ruin, the single, stable point on a planet of chaos. It was the collective mental library of the entire Chozo species, and the key to turning the galaxy into a graveyard of primitive civilizations. Samus didn't slow down. She reached the core vault minutes after the sentinel. A massive blast door, sealed for millennia, was already groaning open, melted partly by the machine's desperate energy surge. She burst inside. The chamber was immense, but unlike the other ruins, it was pristine. Thousands of holographic spheres, the archive of Chozo knowledge, floated in organized silence. In the center, The anchor of silence was manifesting. It was not a memory or a physical projection. It was a single, pure, terrifyingly beautiful beam of white light shooting up into the ceiling. It was the Chozo's ultimate, final ideal, the psychic promise of nothingness. No pain, no power, no ambition, no technology, just silence, safety, and a quiet regression to basic survival. The sentinel was standing directly beneath the beam, absorbing its energy. It was glowing, stabilizing, preparing for the broadcast that would erase all higher life. The great silence is absolute, the sentinel broadcasted, its voice now booming and triumphant. All 4 pillars of betrayal have been neutralized. The only acceptable solution is the activation of the final ideal. The galaxy will be saved from itself. The remnant materialized one last time, his body radiating effort. Samus, you must disrupt the anchor of silence. But you cannot destroy this one with a counter-truth of your own. This anchor is pure ideal. You must project a concept it cannot process. Forgiveness. Forgiveness, Samus yelled, skidding to a halt. The suit's thrusters hissed. Yes, the Luminoth based this anchor on their guilt, the ultimate self-punishment. If you forgive them, if you accept the tragedy of their noble, terrible failure, the psychic foundation of this ideal will collapse. You must forgive the Chozo for their fear, their betrayal, and their desire for extinction. Samus looked at the sentinel, then at the pure, silent white light of the anchor. She realized she couldn't hate the Chozo anymore. She had destroyed their guilt. Now, she had to destroy their final act of self-loathing. She channeled every ounce of her remaining psychic power into the psyaugment and projected not a memory, but a feeling, the hardest one she knew, the final counter-truth. Samus projected the silent, profound acceptance of the Chozo's immense, failed ambition. She projected the psychic message that their fear was real, their intention was noble, and their solution was tragically wrong. She projected forgiveness for the lie of her childhood, for the cosmic meddling, and for the fear that led them to try and destroy the universe to save it. The violet wave of her projected forgiveness hit the pure white light of the anchor of silence. The effect was instantaneous and catastrophic. The white light shrieked, folding in on itself. The pure ideal of nothingness was overloaded by the complex, painful, and ultimately beautiful reality of acceptance. The anchor dissolved in a flash of blinding, merciful light. The sentinel was violently thrown backward, slamming against the far wall of the vault. Its metallic shell was cracked, its crystalline core sputtering. It was defeated, reduced to a heap of inert, magnificent technology. The remnant sighed, its light dimming for the last time. Thank you, Samus Aran. The Chozo are finally at rest. The spirit guide vanished completely, leaving only silence. Samus stood alone in the vault, her power suit humming, the psyaugment still glowing, now a natural, powerful extension of her arm. The galactic extinction was averted. She walked slowly to the inert sentinel, placing her armored hand on its massive, cracked casing. It was just a machine now, a monument to a species that was too afraid of its own power. But the final act of this story wasn't defeating the machine. It was about what she did next. She looked at the thousands of floating holographic spheres, the entire archived knowledge of the Chozo, stretching back to the dawn of the galaxy. The knowledge they were willing to sacrifice everything to destroy. Samus raised the Psyaugment and gently touched the nearest sphere. The violet light flowed out, not to destroy, but to integrate. Her Chozo heritage, her human perspective, and her new, controlled psychic power fused with the archive. She didn't destroy the knowledge, she absorbed it, integrating the Chozo's entire history and technology directly into the core matrix of her power suit. The suit's color didn't change, but it shimmered. It was no longer a cage. It was the ultimate, evolved form of the Chozo's legacy, a living, psychic library. Samus Aran was no longer just a bounty hunter in a suit. She was the final keeper of Chozo lore, the one being who could truly wield their knowledge without succumbing to their self-destructive fear. With the knowledge of how to stabilize and control dimensional rifts now flowing through her, she turned toward the main entrance. She had a crippled gunship waiting outside, and a galaxy that had no idea how close it had come to utter de-evolution. She had fought the last battle of the Metroid Prime era, not with plasma and missiles, but with her own resilient, defiant human heart. And the galaxy would never know.